Jimin almost fainted from exhaustion backstage. Jungkook carried him without a care for the camera, his gaze full of fear of losing. Backstage chaos erupts when exhaustion strikes Jimin, and Jungkook's desperate act reveals fear, loyalty, and a bond stronger than fame. "Jimin, stay with me, look at me." The roar of the crowd beyond the curtains blurred into a distant, oceanic thunder as Jungkook caught Jimin just before his knees struck the cold concrete floor. The fluorescent lights backstage flickered like faulty stars, casting sharp shadows across cables, discarded water bottles, and trembling hands that no longer obeyed their owner. Sweat clung to Jimin's skin, turning his stage makeup into faint streaks that traced the exhaustion he had hidden for weeks. The cameras were still rolling somewhere behind them. Managers shouted, staff rushed, none of it mattered. Jungkook's arms tightened around Jimin's weight, pulling him close, as if proximity alone could anchor him to consciousness. Jimin's breath came in shallow bursts, each one weaker than the last, his fingers twitching against Jungkook's sleeve like he was trying to hold on to something slipping away. "I'm fine," Jimin whispered, though his voice was a ghost of its usual warmth. The lie hovered between them, fragile and transparent. Jungkook knew the signs. He had watched Jimin push through rehearsals with a smile too bright, skip meals with casual excuses, and laugh off the tremor in his hands. He had told himself it was dedication. He had told himself they were all tired, but the memory of Jimin swaying during sound check, just for a second, now returned like a warning he had ignored. Fear, sharp and unfamiliar, clawed at Jungkook's chest, not fear of scandal or headlines or the relentless gaze of fans and cameras. Fear of loss, fear that the person who had taught him to stand confidently on stage could vanish behind the very lights that adored him. Backstage smelled of metal, sweat, and the faint sweetness of spilled energy drinks. The air felt too thin, too tight. Jungkook adjusted his grip and lifted Jimin fully into his arms, ignoring the startled gasps around him. The world might dissect this moment frame by frame later, but right now, there was only the fragile rhythm of Jimin's heartbeat against his chest. "You don't have to carry me," Jimin murmured, eyes half-lidded. "I do," Jungkook replied, voice breaking despite his effort to steady it. "Just this once, let me." As he moved down the narrow corridor toward the dressing room, memories flickered through his mind in fractured flashes. Jimin laughing under rehearsal lights, Jimin correcting his dance steps with patient hands, Jimin staying up late to make sure everyone had eaten. The thought that someone so relentlessly giving could collapse in silence filled Jungkook with a quiet, simmering guilt. Inside the dressing room, the noise dulled to a muted hum. Jungkook lowered Jimin onto the couch, his hands lingering a moment longer than necessary, as if letting go might undo something vital. A stylist hovered nearby with trembling fingers, unsure whether to help or retreat. A manager spoke urgently into a phone. The world was moving again, but Jungkook remained fixed in place. Jimin's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then settling on Jungkook's face. For a brief second, vulnerability stripped away the idol, the performer, the perfection. There was only a man who had given everything he had, and then more. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Jimin said faintly, a weak attempt at humor. Jungkook let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Don't joke about disappearing." Silence settled between them, heavy but honest. Outside, the crowd continued to chant their names, unaware of the fragile stillness inside these walls. Fame demanded endurance. The stage demanded perfection, but in this quiet moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the warmth slowly returning to Jimin's fingers as Jungkook held his hand. What mattered was the unspoken promise forming between them. To notice, to intervene, to carry each other when the lights became too heavy to bear alone. The performance would go on, it always did, but something had shifted, an invisible line crossed, a truth revealed in the harsh glow of backstage lights. They were not invincible, they were not untouchable, they were human, bound by exhaustion, loyalty, and a fear of loss too profound to name. And for the first time that night, as Jimin's breathing steadied, and the chaos beyond the door softened into distant noise, Jungkook allowed himself to believe that holding on, truly holding on, might be enough to keep them both from falling. The dressing room door slammed shut hard enough to rattle the mirrors, and the sudden silence felt more violent than the roar of the stadium outside. "You should have told us." Taehyung's voice cut through the air, raw and unfiltered, as he paced like a storm trapped in human form. "You don't just collapse, Jimin. Not like that, not alone." Jimin sat upright now, a blanket draped over his shoulders, his pale fingers wrapped around a bottle of water he hadn't yet opened. His gaze stayed fixed on the floor, as if the scuffed tiles held answers he couldn't bear to speak. "I said I'm fine," he murmured. "You're not fine," Jungkook snapped, the words escaping before he could temper them. His hands were still trembling. He hid them by clenching his fists. "Fine people don't stop breathing properly backstage." The accusation hung in the room like smoke. Namjoon stepped forward, his usual calm fractured but not gone. "Everyone, breathe. Yelling won't help him." "But maybe it'll make him listen," Taehyung shot back, eyes shining with something dangerously close to tears. "We're not just co-workers, we're not props in each other's success stories." Jimin's jaw tightened. "You think I don't know that?" The words were soft, but they struck harder than a shout. A beat of silence followed. Outside, the crowd's chant shifted rhythm, their voices rising like a tidal wave against the walls. The show was still going. The world had not stopped for Jimin's collapse. It never would. Jungkook leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low. "Then why do you keep acting like you're alone in this?" Jimin finally looked up. His eyes were glassy, not with weakness, but with something far more dangerous, defiance mixed with shame. "Because someone has to hold it together," he said. "Because if I stop smiling, people worry. If I slow down, we fall behind. If I admit I'm tired," he swallowed. "What if I'm not enough anymore?" The confession cracked something open in the room. Taehyung's anger faltered. Namjoon closed his eyes briefly, as if absorbing the weight of those words. Jungkook felt the ground shift beneath his certainty. "You were enough before the world knew your name," Jungkook said quietly. "You're enough if you never step on stage again." Jimin let out a hollow laugh. "That's easy for you to say. You're the golden one, the one who never seems to break." Jungkook recoiled as if struck. "You think I don't break?" His voice rose, sharp and unsteady. "You think I don't lie awake wondering who I am when the lights go off? You think I don't feel like I'm one mistake away from losing everything? I just learned to hide it better." The confession stunned them all. Jimin stared at him, the fragile wall between them beginning to crumble. "Then, why didn't you say anything?" "Because you were always the one taking care of us," Jungkook replied. "And I was afraid that if you saw me fall apart, you'd finally let yourself collapse too." The truth landed like thunder. Taehyung turned away, wiping his face with the back of his hand, pretending he wasn't crying. Namjoon exhaled slowly, the sound heavy with understanding. "You're both idiots," Namjoon said gently. "You're trying to protect each other by suffering in silence." A bitter smile tugged at Jimin's lips. "Sounds poetic when you say it like that." The door burst open before anyone could respond. A manager rushed in, face pale. "We have a problem." The words sucked the air from the room. "What kind of problem?" Namjoon asked. "The cameras caught everything," the manager said. "Jungkook carrying you, the panic. It's already spreading online. Hashtags, speculation, people think it's a medical emergency. Some are saying worse." Jimin's grip tightened on the water bottle until the plastic crinkled. "Worse." "They're saying burnout, collapse, disbandment rumors are already trending." The word disbandment detonated in the room. Taehyung swore under his breath. Jungkook felt a cold wave of dread crash over him. Jimin's face went utterly still, the kind of stillness that comes before something shatters. "All from a moment of weakness," Jimin whispered. "No," Jungkook said firmly, "from a moment of humanity." But the damage was already unfolding in real time, beyond the walls, beyond their control. Jimin stood abruptly, the blanket sliding to the floor. For a terrifying second, Jungkook thought he might collapse again. Instead, Jimin squared his shoulders, the performer returning like armor snapping into place. "We go back out there," Jimin said. "We finish the show." Namjoon hesitated. "Are you sure?" "No," Jimin admitted, "but I'm more afraid of what happens if we don't." Jungkook stepped in front of him. "And what happens to you if you keep pretending you're unbreakable?" Their eyes locked, a storm of fear, anger, and unspoken devotion swirling between them. Jimin's voice dropped to a whisper, "Then don't let me pretend." The request was not heroic, it was desperate. Before Jungkook could answer, the stage manager's voice crackled over the intercom, 2 minutes to position. The countdown had begun. Taehyung moved first, placing a hand on Jimin's shoulder, firm and grounding. Namjoon followed, his presence steady as bedrock. Jungkook hesitated only a moment before taking Jimin's hand, squeezing once, a silent vow passing between their palms. As they stepped into the corridor, the sound of the crowd surged to meet them, a living force of expectation and love. The lights ahead burned white-hot, unforgiving. Jimin inhaled shakily, "If I fall again." "You won't fall alone," Jungkook said. They walked toward the stage together, not as untouchable icons, but as fragile, stubborn, fiercely loyal human beings stepping into the blinding light, unaware that beyond the arena walls, the narrative of their lives was already being rewritten, one rumor at a time, and that the greatest test of their bond was no longer exhaustion, but the world's hunger to watch them break. The stage lights exploded into brilliance, swallowing them whole. The roar of tens of thousands surged like a living storm, vibrating through the floor, through their bones, through the fragile resolve they had pieced together backstage. Jimin felt the heat of the pyrotechnics kiss his skin as he stepped into formation, his smile snapping into place with muscle memory so precise it almost felt mechanical. But his pulse was still uneven. Beside him, Jungkook didn't take his eyes off him. The opening beat dropped. Their bodies moved in perfect synchronization, years of discipline overriding exhaustion. The crowd screamed louder, unaware that every step Jimin took felt like balancing on a blade's edge. Halfway through the second song, Jungkook leaned in during a transition, voice barely audible under the music. "You're drifting left." "I know," Jimin muttered through a smile meant for the cameras. "My vision, lagging." Jungkook's stomach twisted. "We can signal a cut." "And confirm every rumor," Jimin's tone sharpened, still smiling, still dancing. "No." The choreography snapped into a rapid sequence. Jimin's muscles screamed in protest, his lungs burning as if the air had thinned. Sweat blurred his vision, turning the sea of light sticks into a galaxy that spun too fast. A misstep. So small the audience would never notice. So large Jungkook felt it like a shockwave. "Jimin," he whispered. "I'm here," Jimin replied, but his voice was fraying. At the edge of the stage, Taehyung shot them a glance, sharp and worried. Namjoon adjusted his positioning subtly, tightening their formation to shield Jimin from the camera angles that could betray his instability. They were performing triage in motion. The third song ended in a cascade of sparks and thunderous applause. The lights dimmed for a immense segment. Microphones rose, smiles returned. Jimin stepped forward, breath still uneven. The cheers intensified, waves of devotion crashing against him. He lifted his mic, hands trembling just enough that Jungkook noticed. "Did you miss us?" Jimin asked, voice bright, almost playful. The arena erupted. He swallowed, forcing air into lungs that resisted. "We missed you too." Jungkook watched him closely, every word cost him. Taehyung suddenly stepped in, draping an arm over Jimin's shoulders with exaggerated affection. "He's lying," Taehyung told the crowd. "He cried in the dressing room." The audience gasped, then laughed. Jimin shot him a glare. "Traitor." "But you're our traitor," Taehyung shot back softly, too low for the crowd to hear. "Don't scare us like that again." The moment passed as humor for the audience, but Jungkook saw the truth. Taehyung's hand was steadying Jimin's weight. Namjoon took the lead, steering the conversation. We've been working hard to show you our best tonight, so please stay with us until the end." The phrase carried a double meaning, none of them acknowledged aloud. The music resumed. By the fifth song, Jimin's world had narrowed to rhythm and survival. He focused on Jungkook's shoulder line, on Namjoon's cues, on Taehyung's grounding presence. The crowd blurred into sound and color. His body felt both too heavy and dangerously light. Then the unexpected happened. A fan threw something onto the stage. It landed near Jimin's feet, a small wrapped box. Security tensed at the edges. Jungkook's instincts flared. Jimin froze mid-step. The music continued. "Kick it aside," Jungkook murmured urgently. Jimin hesitated. The box was wrapped in pale blue paper, a handwritten note taped to the top. His name was written on it. Curiosity warred with protocol. "Jimin," Namjoon warned quietly. "Too late." Jimin bent, snatched the box, and moved it toward the backline in one fluid motion disguised as choreography. The audience screamed, thinking it part of the show. Backstage staff rushed to collect it. But in that split second, Jimin had seen the note. "You don't have to die for them." The words slammed into him harder than exhaustion. His step faltered. Jungkook caught his arm mid-spin, grip iron strong. What did it say? Jimin shook his head, but his eyes were shaken, haunted. Nothing. "You're a terrible liar." The next formation forced them apart. Jimin's thoughts spiraled. Die for them. Was that what this was? Burning himself down to be light for others? The applause, the love, the expectations. When did gratitude become obligation, and obligation become self-erasure? The final chorus thundered. Pyro flared. And then, in the blinding white light, Jimin's knees buckled. This time, the fall was unmistakable. The music screeched to an abrupt halt. Gasps rippled through the arena like a shockwave. Jungkook reached him before gravity completed its claim, dropping to his knees on the stage, uncaring of the cameras now broadcasting every second live. "Jimin, stay with me." The crowd's roar fractured into confused cries. Staff sprinted forward. Namjoon signaled frantically for the lights to dim. Taehyung hovered, pale and shaking. Jimin's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, then found Jungkook's face. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single point of connection. "I messed up," Jimin whispered. "No," Jungkook said, voice breaking. "You stopped pretending." The words hung between them as medics arrived, as the arena buzzed with fear and speculation, as millions watched in real time. And for the first time, with the stage lights dimming and the illusion shattered beyond repair, none of them knew whether what would happen next would save them or end everything they had built together. The arena lights dimmed to a confused twilight, thousands of glowing light sticks wavering like stars unsure whether to shine or fall. "Cut the feed, cut the live feed now," a producer's voice crackled through the in-ear monitors, sharp with panic. But it was already too late. Millions had seen Jimin collapse. And millions were still watching as Jungkook knelt on the stage floor, cradling him without a shred of the polished composure the world expected. "Jimin, stay with me," Jungkook whispered, his forehead nearly touching Jimin's. "Don't close your eyes, not here, not like this." Jimin's lashes trembled. The stadium's thunder had dissolved into a low, terrified murmur. Somewhere, a fan screamed his name. Somewhere else, someone sobbed. "I'm still here," Jimin breathed, though his voice sounded like it belonged to someone far away. Medics rushed in, their shoes pounding against the stage. A bright penlight flashed across Jimin's pupils, questions fired in rapid succession. "Can you hear me? Are you dizzy? Any chest pain?" Jungkook's hands hovered helplessly, as if letting go might cause Jimin to disappear. Namjoon crouched beside them, voice controlled but strained. He's been overworking, minimal sleep, irregular meals. Jimin flinched. "Taehyung." "Don't," Namjoon said softly. "Not now." Taehyung stood a step back, his hands tangled in his own hair, eyes wild. We should have stopped the show earlier. We knew he was off. We all knew. The guilt in his voice was a blade. The medic looked up. We need to move him, now. Jungkook's arms tightened instinctively. I'll carry him. We have a stretcher. I'll carry him, Jungkook repeated, voice low and immovable. For a split second, no one argued. He lifted Jimin again, ignoring the cameras, the fans, the headlines already writing themselves. Jimin's head fell against his shoulder, breath warm but uneven against his neck. The stadium erupted, not in cheers, but in a chaotic wave of voices, fear and love colliding into something raw and uncontainable. As they disappeared behind the curtain, the illusion shattered completely. Backstage, the fluorescent lights buzzed like angry insects, staff scrambled, phones rang non-stop, the air smelled of antiseptic and panic. They laid Jimin on a narrow medical cot, a blood pressure cuff tightened around his arm, a pulse oximeter clipped onto his finger. Jungkook stood frozen at the foot of the cot, chest heaving, hands still curled, as if holding invisible weight. "Step back, please," a medic said. He didn't move. "Jungkook," Namjoon said quietly, "let them help him." Jungkook's voice came out hoarse. "What if I let go and something happens?" Namjoon's expression cracked, just for a moment. "Then we face it together, like we always have." Reluctantly, Jungkook stepped back. Jimin's eyes opened again, unfocused. "Did we finish the set?" Taehyung let out a choked laugh that turned into a sob halfway through. "You collapsed on stage, and that's your first question." Jimin tried to smile. It trembled and fell apart. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The apology ignited something volatile. Jungkook slammed his fist against the wall. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Stop apologizing for being human." Everyone froze. Jungkook's chest rose and fell violently. "You think we need perfection? You think we'd trade you for flawless choreography and a fake smile? I don't care about the show. I don't care about the cameras. I care about you breathing." The rawness in his voice left no room for performance. Jimin stared at him, eyes wide, as if seeing him for the first time, not the unshakable golden Maknae, but a man terrified of loss. "You looked at me like I was already gone," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook's voice broke, "Because for a second I thought you were." Silence swallowed the room. Taehyung turned away, shoulders shaking. Namjoon pressed his fingers against the bridge of his nose, fighting his own unraveling. The medic cleared his throat gently. "His vitals are stabilizing. Severe exhaustion, dehydration, likely stress-induced syncope. He needs rest. Real rest, not a few hours." The words landed heavier than any diagnosis. Rest was the one luxury their world never allowed. A manager rushed in, face drained of color. "The internet is exploding. Clips are everywhere. Some are praising the honesty. Others are accusing us of exploiting his condition for publicity. There are already conspiracy threads claiming this was staged." Taehyung spun around. "Staged?" He collapsed. "People believe what fits their narrative," Namjoon said bitterly. Jimin closed his eyes. "They're not wrong to question. We sell perfection. When reality breaks through, it looks like a trick." Jungkook stepped closer to the cot. "Then let them question, let them see the truth." "And what is the truth?" Jimin asked, voice barely audible. Jungkook hesitated. The answer was terrifying in its simplicity. "That we're not indestructible," he said, "and we were never meant to be." The room fell into a fragile quiet, broken only by the steady beep of the monitor and the distant echo of a crowd that refused to leave. Outside, fans held up signs and lit their light sticks in silent solidarity. Inside, the weight of years, expectations, sacrifices, unspoken fears pressed down on them all at once. Jimin turned his head toward Jungkook. "If I step back, even for a little while, will you all hate me for it?" Taehyung's head snapped up. "Hate you? I'll drag you off stage myself if that's what it takes to keep you alive." Namjoon nodded. The group survives because the people in it survive. Jungkook reached for Jimin's hand, gripping it tightly. I'd rather perform in an empty room than on a stage where you're destroying yourself to stand beside me. Tears slid silently into Jimin's hairline. For once, he didn't hide them. Outside the dressing room, a television screen replayed the moment of his collapse on an endless loop. Headlines scrolled beneath it in a dozen languages. Speculation, concern, blame, devotion. Inside, none of that mattered. For the first time since the lights had gone down, Jimin allowed his body to sink fully into the cot, surrendering to the exhaustion he had fought for too long. His grip on Jungkook's hand loosened, not in departure, but in trust. And in that fragile, unguarded stillness, they all understood that the real battle was no longer against choreography, schedules, or public scrutiny, but against the quiet, relentless belief that they had to break themselves to be worthy of being loved. Rain hammered against the hospital windows like a relentless drumline, each strike echoing the chaos that had followed them from the stage. The private wing was supposed to be quiet. Instead, it pulsed with tension. A television mounted high in the corner replayed the footage again, Jimin collapsing under blinding lights, Jungkook dropping to his knees, the crowd's roar fracturing into fear. The clip looped without mercy, each replay stripping away context until it looked like tragedy distilled into 10 seconds. "Turn it off," Jungkook said. No one moved. "Turn it off," he shouted, voice cracking. Taehyung grabbed the remote and killed the screen. The sudden silence rang louder than the broadcast. Jimin lay in the hospital bed, IV line taped to his arm, color slowly returning to his face, but not to his eyes. He stared at the blank television as if the reflection might still show him falling. "I look weak," he murmured. Namjoon's jaw tightened. Namjoon had been fielding calls for hours, management, doctors, media teams, family. Each conversation carved new lines into his composure. "You look human," Namjoon replied. Jimin let out a faint, humorless laugh. "That's not what we sell." Jungkook stepped closer to the bed. "Maybe that's the problem." The words hung in the air, controversial and dangerous. A knock sounded. The manager entered, tablet clutched like a shield. His face told the story before his mouth did. "It's worse," he said. Taehyung's eyes flashed. "Define worse." Stock prices dipped. Sponsors are asking for statements. Some are threatening to pause campaigns until we clarify the situation. There are rumors of internal conflict, health cover-ups, even contractual exploitation. The word exploitation landed like a grenade. Jimin's fingers curled weakly around the bedsheet. "They think we're being forced to perform." "They think a lot of things," the manager said. "The narrative is spiraling." Jungkook's laugh was sharp and bitter. "So the world finally notices we're not machines and calls it a scandal." Namjoon's voice was low. "This isn't just about us. Hundreds of staff depend on this machine running." "And what about the people inside the machine?" Jungkook shot back. The room went still. Taehyung leaned against the wall, arms crossed tightly. "We can't pretend this didn't happen. If we release another polished statement about temporary fatigue, we're lying again." Jimin closed his eyes. "If we tell the truth, we risk everything." "Everything was already at risk the moment you collapsed," Jungkook said. Silence thickened, heavy with unsaid fears. The rain intensified, streaking the windows like tears that refused to fall. Jimin's voice emerged, fragile but steady. "Do you know what the note said?" All eyes turned to him. Jungkook's chest tightened. "You told me it was nothing." "I lied," Jimin admitted. "It said, you don't have to die for them." Taehyung inhaled sharply. Namjoon's expression darkened. Jimin stared at his hands. "I didn't realize how close I was to believing the opposite." The confession cracked something open in all of them. Jungkook sat on the edge of the bed. "You were never meant to die for anyone, not the fans, not the company, not us." But we built our lives on sacrifice, Jimin whispered. Every missed holiday, every injury hidden behind a smile, every time we said, we're fine when we were. Namjoon nodded slowly. We told ourselves it was the price of a dream. And when does the price become too high? Taehyung asked. No one answered. A sudden commotion erupted in the hallway, raised voices, hurried footsteps, the unmistakable sound of reporters being held back by security. They found the hospital, the manager said grimly. Flashes of light exploded through the frosted glass. Shouts overlapped. Is Jimin conscious? Was the collapse staged? Are the members being overworked? Is this the beginning of the end? Jimin flinched at the last question. Jungkook stood abruptly, fury igniting. They don't get to decide our ending. Namjoon placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Rage won't fix this. No, Jungkook said, but silence might destroy us. He turned back to Jimin. Tell me what you want, not what the company wants, not what the fans expect, what you want. The question was terrifying in its simplicity. Jimin's lips parted, then closed. For years, his wants had been secondary to needs, group needs, fan needs, industry demands. The concept of choosing himself felt almost forbidden. I want to breathe without feeling guilty, he said finally. I want to rest without thinking I'm letting everyone down. I want to live long enough to know who I am without the stage. Taehyung's eyes filled. Then we fight for that. The manager hesitated. If you make a statement like that, it will shake the industry. Namjoon met his gaze. Maybe it needs shaking. The hallway noise swelled. Security was losing ground. Jungkook squeezed Jimin's hand. We faced them together, this time no masks. Jimin looked at each of them, at Taehyung's fierce loyalty, Namjoon's steady resolve, Jungkook's trembling but unyielding devotion. Fear still lived in his chest, but it no longer stood alone. Together, he agreed. Outside the door, the world waited, hungry for answers, for scandal, for proof that even the brightest stars could burn out. Inside, for the first time, they considered the possibility that survival itself might be the most radical act of all. The hallway, outside the hospital room, roared like a breaking dam. Voices collided. Camera shutters snapped in violent bursts. Security barked orders that dissolved into static under the relentless surge of reporters demanding answers that no statement could safely contain. Inside, the air felt too still. Jimin sat upright now, the IV still threaded into his arm like a fragile tether to the moment he could no longer outrun. The hospital gown hung loosely on his frame, a stark contrast to the precision-tailored costumes he had worn only hours ago. He looked smaller, but somehow more real. Jungkook stood by the window, jaw clenched, watching the flashes of light bleed through the blinds like lightning in a trapped storm. Every burst illuminated the fear he refused to voice. They're not going to leave, Taehyung muttered, packing. Taehyung had always carried his emotions close to the surface, but now they burned openly, anger, guilt, protectiveness. They smell blood. They smell uncertainty, Namjoon corrected quietly, and uncertainty sells. Jimin's fingers tightened around the blanket. We created this. Namjoon shook his head. We participated in it, that's different. Jungkook turned from the window. No, he's right. We helped build a world where collapsing on stage becomes breaking news instead of a sign someone needed help sooner. The manager shifted uncomfortably near the door. We need to release a statement in the next 20 minutes. If we don't control the narrative, it will control us. Taehyung scoffed. Control, that word again. Words matter, the manager insisted. If you say the wrong thing, sponsors withdraw, schedules collapse, contracts. People collapse, Jungkook interrupted, voice like steel drawn across stone. That's what you should be worried about. The accusation hung heavy. The manager looked toward Namjoon, searching for the diplomat. We're trying to protect everyone. Namjoon's gaze didn't waver. Protecting the brand, and protecting the people are not always the same thing. Silence swallowed the room. Jimin's voice emerged, soft but cutting. If the brand requires me to destroy myself, then maybe it deserves to collapse. The words detonated. The manager's face drained of color. You don't mean that. Jimin met his eyes. I don't know what I mean anymore, that's the problem. Outside, a reporter's voice rose above the chaos. Sources claim internal pressure forced the group to perform despite health risks. Taehyung let out a humorless laugh. Sources, the invisible villains. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair. They're not entirely wrong. All eyes snapped to him. You think we weren't pressured? He continued. Not always directly, but the schedules, the expectations, the fear of disappointing millions, the knowledge that if one of us slows down, the entire system stutters. That's pressure. Namjoon exhaled slowly. He's right. The manager opened his mouth, then closed it again. Jimin looked between them, stunned. You all felt it too. Taehyung's smile was brittle. I thought I was the only one who sometimes wished for a minor injury just to justify resting. The confession sucked the air from the room. Namjoon looked down. I've drafted statements in my head for years. Apologies for things we never did wrong. Gratitude for love that sometimes felt like obligation. I told myself it was leadership. Jungkook's voice softened. I kept running because you all were running. I didn't know how to be the one who stopped. Jimin's breath hitched. I kept smiling because you all needed someone to believe everything was okay. The truth settled between them, raw and undeniable. They had been performing stability for one another as much as for the world. The hallway noise surged again. Security was losing ground. A loud bang rattled the door as someone pushed too hard against the barrier. We can't hide forever, the manager said, voice tight. They will get a statement with or without you. Jungkook stepped toward Jimin. Then we give them one, the truth. The truth will terrify them, the manager warned. The truth already terrifies us, Taehyung replied. Namjoon nodded slowly, decision crystallizing in his eyes. We go out together, no scripts, no euphemisms. The manager stared at him as if he had suggested detonating the building. That could end careers. Namjoon's expression was steady. Then at least they end honestly. Jimin swung his legs over the side of the bed. The motion was slow, deliberate. Jungkook moved instinctively to steady him, hands hovering before finally resting on his shoulders. You don't have to do this, Jungkook murmured. Jimin looked up at him. If I don't, someone else will collapse next. Maybe not on stage, maybe in silence. Taehyung wiped his eyes roughly. You're impossible. And you love me for it, Jimin replied faintly. Namjoon opened the door. The sound hit them like a physical force. Shouts, questions, camera shutters exploding in rapid fire. Security tried to hold the line, but the sight of the members stepping into the corridor sent a shockwave through the press. Jimin, are you okay? Was the collapse due to overwork? Are you being forced to continue promotions? Is the group at risk of disbandment? The last question hung like a blade. Jimin's knees wavered. Jungkook's hand tightened on his arm, grounding him. Namjoon raised a hand. The noise didn't stop immediately, but it faltered. We will speak, he said, voice amplified by sheer authority, but you will listen. The hallway quieted in ragged fragments. Jimin stepped forward. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the IV bandage on his arm, the exhaustion etched into his features, the absence of stage makeup that left him disarmingly human. I collapsed, he said simply, not because of a stunt, not because of a hidden illness, because I was exhausted and afraid to admit it. A ripple of murmurs spread. Jungkook's voice followed, fierce. We are not invincible. We are not products. We are people who have been afraid to rest because we thought the world would stop loving us if we did. Taehyung added, if you love us, let us live. Namjoon finished. The future of this group will not be decided by rumors, markets, or fear. It will be decided by whether we can remain human in an industry that often forgets what that means. Silence fell. For once, the cameras did not feel like weapons, they felt like witnesses. Jimin swayed slightly. Jungkook steadied him without hesitation, the gesture unguarded, unpolished, real. In that moment, under the harsh hospital lights and the unblinking gaze of the world, they were no longer performing strength. They were choosing survival. And the world, for the first time, did not know whether to applaud or to reckon with the truth they had just been given. Morning arrived without warmth. A grey, unforgiving light seeped through the hospital blinds, painting the room in muted tones that felt more like aftermath than recovery. The rain had stopped, but the city outside remained restless, sirens in the distance, traffic murmuring, the low hum of a world that had not paused for their reckoning. Jimin hadn't slept. He sat upright in bed, the IV removed. A faint bruise blooming beneath the tape mark on his arm, like a quiet reminder that even small wounds left traces. The hospital gown had been replaced with a loose black hoodie someone had brought overnight. It swallowed his frame, making him look younger, almost like the trainee who had once arrived with stubborn dreams and a fear of being left behind. Across the room, Jungkook was slumped in a chair, arms folded on the edge of the bed, head resting on them. He had fallen asleep sometime near dawn, refusing to leave even when staff insisted visiting hours were over. Jimin watched him breathe. The steady rise and fall felt like proof that something in the world remained stable. The door opened quietly. Namjoon stepped in first, coffee in hand, his expression carved from equal parts exhaustion and resolve. Taehyung followed, sunglasses hiding eyes that hadn't stopped burning since the night before. "They're still outside," Taehyung murmured, nodding toward the window. "Fans, reporters, more fans than reporters." Jimin's lips parted. They didn't go home. Namjoon shook his head. Some brought blankets, they're lighting their sticks in silence. The image struck like a quiet thunderclap. Jungkook stirred at the sound of voices, lifting his head. His eyes found Jimin instantly, as if pulled by gravity. Relief softened his features. "You're still here," Jungkook said, voice hoarse. Jimin managed a small smile. "I could say the same." Taehyung dropped into the chair by the wall. "You scared 10 years off my life." "Only 10, Jimin teased faintly. Taehyung pointed at him. "Don't joke, I'm still deciding whether to hug you or strangle you." "Please choose hug," Jungkook muttered. The fragile humor fractured as Namjoon set his coffee down and spoke. "The company wants an emergency meeting today." The air tightened. "Of course they do," Taehyung said flatly. "Damage control." Namjoon's jaw flexed. "They're calling it a strategic reassessment." Jungkook let out a bitter laugh. "Strategic, like he's a marketing variable." Jimin's gaze dropped. "They're not wrong to worry if I can't perform." "Stop," Jungkook said sharply. The word cracked through the room. "You're not a defective product," he continued, quieter but fiercer. "You're a person who reached a limit." Taehyung nodded. "And if they can't see the difference, maybe we're the ones who need to reassess." Namjoon looked between them. "This meeting will decide more than schedules. It will decide how much control we actually have over our own lives." Silence fell, heavy with the weight of that truth. Jimin swallowed. "What if we don't have any?" Jungkook reached for his hand. "Then we take it." The door opened again. The manager entered, face drawn tight, tablet clutched like a lifeline. "They want you there in an hour," he said, "all of you." Taehyung stood. He was hospitalized less than 12 hours ago. "They insist his presence is necessary." Jungkook's expression hardened. "Necessary for what? Optics." The manager hesitated. "They're worried about rumors of contract disputes." Namjoon's voice was dangerously calm. "We never mentioned contracts." "They're speculating." Taehyung scoffed. "They always do. If we breathe wrong, it's a conspiracy. Jimin's fingers tightened around Jungkook's. What if they're right to speculate? All eyes turned to him. He inhaled slowly. What if we've stayed silent about things that shouldn't be silent? The question landed like a match in a room full of dry tinder. Namjoon studied him carefully. Are you saying you want to speak about internal pressures publicly? I'm saying I don't want the next person to collapse alone, Jimin replied. Jungkook's grip tightened. You won't be alone. Taehyung's voice softened. We've been afraid of breaking the illusion, but the illusion almost broke you. The manager looked stricken. If you challenge the system openly, the backlash will be severe, not just from executives, fans, media, even industry peers. Namjoon nodded. Change always has a cost. Jungkook stood, so does silence. Outside, a faint sound drifted through the window, fans singing softly, not the thunderous chants of a concert, but a fragile, unified melody, a promise, a plea. Jimin closed his eyes, listening. They're still here, he whispered. Taehyung moved to the window and lifted the blinds slightly. The sight stole his breath. Hundreds of fans stood in the cold morning air, light sticks glowing pale lavender, signs held high, rest is not weakness. Stay with us, but stay alive. We choose you, not perfection. Taehyung's voice broke. They're not asking for a performance. Jungkook joined him, staring down at the quiet sea of devotion. They're asking for us. Namjoon exhaled, something unspoken settling into place. Then we give them honesty. The manager looked overwhelmed. You're about to challenge an entire industry. Jimin swung his legs off the bed again, steadier this time. No, he said softly, we're about to tell the truth about being human. Jungkook stood at his side instantly. Taehyung placed a hand on his shoulder. Namjoon opened the door. The hallway was still crowded, but the atmosphere had shifted. The frenzy of the night before had softened into watchful anticipation. As they stepped out together, the distant sound of fans singing drifted through the building like a heartbeat. For the first time since the collapse, Jimin felt something unfamiliar but unmistakable rising in his chest. Not fear, not obligation, not the crushing weight of expectation. Hope. And it was far more terrifying than exhaustion. The conference room smelled faintly of polished wood and tension. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, now fully awake, indifferent to the storm gathering inside these walls. A long glass table divided the room with surgical precision. On one side sat executives in tailored suits, faces composed into professional neutrality. On the other stood four men who had spent the last decade learning how to turn vulnerability into performance and were now preparing to do the opposite. Namjoon took the seat at the center, posture straight, hands folded. Jimin remained standing for a moment longer, as if testing whether the ground beneath him would hold. Jungkook hovered at his side, close enough to steady him without making it obvious. Taehyung dropped into a chair with a deliberate lack of ceremony, sunglasses still hiding the sleepless fire in his eyes. The CEO cleared his throat. First, we're relieved you're recovering, Jimin. Jimin inclined his head. Thank you. A pause followed, heavy with unsaid calculations. We are facing significant repercussions, the CEO continued. Sponsors are nervous. Investors are asking whether the group can maintain its schedule. The media narrative is volatile. Jungkook let out a quiet, humorless breath. Volatile because someone collapsed from exhaustion. The CEO's expression didn't shift. Volatile because the image of invulnerability has been compromised. Taehyung leaned forward. Invulnerability was never real. It was effective, another executive interjected. The word effective hung in the air like a verdict. Namjoon spoke, voice calm but edged. We are not a product line. You are a global brand, the executive replied, and brands require consistency. Jimin's fingers curled against the glass tabletop. Consistency at what cost? Silence. The CEO steepled his fingers. We are prepared to adjust schedules temporarily. However, We need assurance that this will not become a recurring issue. Jungkook's chair scraped sharply against the floor as he stood. You want a guarantee that human bodies won't fail. The room stiffened. We want reassurance, the CEO corrected. Taehyung's laugh was soft and dangerous, reassurance that we'll keep pretending. Namjoon raised a hand slightly, not to silence them, but to gather the moment. We need to discuss systemic pressure, not just schedules, but expectations, the implicit understanding that rest equals weakness, that illness equals liability. One executive shifted uncomfortably. The industry is demanding. So are we, Namjoon replied. We have demanded more of ourselves than anyone ever asked aloud. Jimin swallowed, his voice quiet but cutting through the room. I collapsed because I was afraid to disappoint people I will never meet. No one moved. I was afraid, he continued, that if I admitted I was struggling, I would become replaceable, that the love we receive is conditional on perfection. The CEO's composure faltered just for a fraction of a second. You are not replaceable. Then stop treating us like we are, Jungkook said. The words landed like a slammed door. A murmur rippled among the executives. We have invested, one began. Taehyung cut him off. We invested too, our youth, our bodies, our identities. The room went still. Namjoon leaned forward. We are not here to threaten, we are here to survive. If survival destabilizes the system, then the system was fragile to begin with. The CEO exhaled slowly. What are you asking for? The question hung in the air, heavier than any demand. Jimin glanced at Jungkook, then Taehyung, then Namjoon. For once, he didn't search for the safest answer. Time, he said, honesty, the right to say we are not okay without it becoming a scandal. Silence. The executives exchanged looks, calculations, risks, the invisible math of profit and perception. And if we refuse, one asked carefully. Jungkook's gaze didn't waver. Then you will have a brand that survives without the people who built it. The threat was quiet, but it reverberated. Taehyung removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes rimmed red but unflinching. We are not bluffing. We almost lost him last night. Next time, it could be any of us, and we will not stand on a stage pretending everything is fine while one of us is breaking. Namjoon's voice softened. We are willing to face backlash. Are you willing to face the truth? The CEO leaned back, studying them as if seeing them for the first time, not as assets, but as four men standing at the edge of something irreversible. Before he could respond, the door burst open. A junior staffer rushed in pale. Sir, there's a live broadcast outside. Fans, thousands now, they're holding a vigil. The room shifted. A vigil, the CEO repeated. They're singing, the staffer said, and holding signs asking the company to let them rest. Taehyung let out a shaky breath. They're protecting us. Jimin's eyes filled. They're giving us permission. Jungkook turned toward the window. From this height, the crowd below looked like a field of flickering stars. Banners stretched across the street. The words were unmistakable even from afar. Humans first, idols second. Rest is love. We will wait. The CEO rose slowly, walking to the window. For a long moment, he said nothing. When he spoke, his voice had lost its corporate polish. If we change course, it will alter expectations across the entire industry. Namjoon joined him at the glass. Then perhaps it's time. The executive room, built for strategy and control, now felt like the eye of a storm no one could contain. Jimin stepped closer, his reflection merging with the cityscape beyond. I don't want to collapse again, he said softly, not because I'm weak, but because I was too afraid to be. Jungkook's hand found his shoulder, steady and unhidden. You won't. Taehyung stood beside them. None of us will, not alone. The CEO turned from the window, the weight of thousands of silent voices pressing against the glass behind him. Then we begin, he said. Not a concession, not a victory, a beginning. Outside, the fans continued to sing, not for perfection, not for spectacle, but for the fragile, defiant hope that the people they loved might finally be allowed to live. The announcement went live at noon. No dramatic music, no polished teaser, just a simple broadcast, 4 chairs, 1 table, unfiltered light pouring through tall windows, and the quiet, unmistakable absence of stage personas. Within seconds, the view count exploded. Namjoon sat in the center, hands folded tightly enough to betray the tension beneath his composure. To his right, Jimin looked pale but steady, dark circles under his eyes no longer concealed. To his left, Jungkook leaned forward, elbows on his knees, gaze fixed and unflinching. Taehyung sat slightly apart, posture loose but eyes sharp, as if daring the world to misunderstand. The silence before they spoke was heavier than any concert intro. Namjoon inhaled, "Thank you for being here with us." The live chat scrolled too fast to read. Hearts, tears, prayers, accusations, demands. Jimin's fingers trembled slightly on the tabletop. Jungkook noticed and shifted his hand closer, not touching, but near enough to anchor. Namjoon continued, "Last night, many of you saw something we have spent years trying to prevent you from seeing." Jimin swallowed, "You saw me fall." The chat surged. Taehyung leaned forward, "And you saw us panic because we did." A pause. Jungkook's voice cut through, low and raw. "We were afraid we were losing him, not as a performer, as a person." The words detonated across the internet. Namjoon's jaw tightened, but he did not soften the truth. "We have built our careers on resilience, on pushing beyond limits, but resilience without rest becomes self-destruction." Jimin closed his eyes briefly. "I thought if I stopped, even for a moment, I would become a burden." The chat flooded with messages, "Never, you are not a burden, rest, we love you." Tears gathered in Taehyung's eyes, but his voice remained steady. "We believed the same lie, that our worth depended on never breaking." Jungkook looked directly into the camera. "We were wrong." The honesty was almost violent. Namjoon clasped his hands tighter. "We are announcing a temporary suspension of group activities." The words landed like a shockwave. The chat exploded, shock, grief, support, anger. Jimin's breath hitched. He pushed forward anyway, "Not because we are ending, but because we want to continue as people who are alive." Taehyung added, "If we return, we want it to be with bodies that are not collapsing and hearts that are not suffocating." A notification pinged loudly from the laptop on the table. None of them moved to silence it. Headlines were already forming in real time. Global supergroup HALTS ACTIVITIS. Industry in shock. Fans divided. Jungkook's expression hardened. "We know some of you will feel betrayed." The chat filled with protests. "You waited for us," he continued. "You defended us, and now we are asking you to wait again, but this time for our survival." Jimin's voice trembled. "If loving us means letting us rest, will you still love us?" The flood of messages turned into a cascade of affirmation, so overwhelming it blurred into a single emotional force. Namjoon exhaled slowly, shoulders lowering for the first time. "We cannot promise when we will return. We can only promise that if we do, it will be honestly." The broadcast ended without fanfare. For a long moment, none of them moved. The room felt too quiet after the roar of millions. Taehyung let out a shaky breath. "We just detonated the industry." Jungkook leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "Or maybe we just told the truth out loud." Jimin's hands began to shake in earnest now that the adrenaline was fading. "What if they stopped loving us?" Namjoon turned to him, eyes steady. "Then their love was never real." The words were gentle but final. A phone rang, then another. The manager's device vibrated non-stop on the table, lighting up with names of sponsors, executives, journalists. He stared at the screen as if it were a ticking bomb. We are trending worldwide, he said hoarsely. Not just the suspension, the speech, the vigil, everything. Taehyung gave a hollow laugh. We asked for honesty, we got a revolution. Outside, the sound of fans singing drifted upward again, louder now, joined by new voices arriving in waves. Jungkook stood and moved to the window. The street below had transformed into a sea of people holding signs, phones, and flickering lights. No chaos, no anger, just presence. They stayed, he murmured. Jimin joined him, shoulder brushing Jungkook. They chose us. Namjoon watched them, something fragile and resolute settling into his chest. Now we have to choose ourselves. Taehyung wiped his face roughly. That sounds harder. It is, Namjoon admitted. Behind them, the television flickered on automatically, airing a panel of commentators already dissecting their decision. Some are calling it courageous, one analyst said. Others say it's irresponsible. Financial losses could be enormous, another added. Or this could mark the beginning of a healthier industry standard. Jungkook grabbed the remote and muted the screen. We didn't do this for them, he said. We did it so we could breathe. Jimin nodded, though fear still flickered in his eyes. I don't know who I am without the stage. Taehyung stepped beside him. Then we find out. Namjoon placed a hand on each of their shoulders, together. For the first time since the collapse, the future stretched before them, not as a schedule, not as a contract, not as a relentless climb, but as an uncertain, terrifying expanse of possibility. Outside, the fans kept singing. Inside, four men stood in the quiet aftermath of a truth that could not be undone, knowing that whatever came next would demand more courage than any performance they had ever given, not to dazzle the world, but to live honestly within it. The night the truth finally surfaced, the air felt heavier than it ever had before. As if the city itself was holding its breath. Rain lashed against the shattered windows of the abandoned building where everything had begun to unravel, where alliances were forged in whispers and broken in screams. Now, under flickering lights and the echo of distant thunder, the last confrontation unfolded. You lied to all of us, Armin's voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the unbearable weight of betrayal. His hands trembled at his sides, knuckles pale, eyes locked on the one person he had trusted beyond reason. Nadia didn't flinch. Her face, once warm and open, had hardened into something unreadable. I did what I had to do, she replied, her tone steady, almost cold. If I hadn't, none of you would be standing here right now. Raka stepped forward, anger burning through his exhaustion. Don't twist this into some heroic sacrifice. People died, Nadia. You made deals with monsters. Her composure finally fractured. You think I don't know that? She shot back, her voice rising, raw and shaking. You think I don't hear their voices every time I close my eyes? I chose the lesser evil because none of you had the courage to choose at all. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. The truth hung between them, ugly and undeniable. Every decision, every secret meeting, every whispered lie had led to this moment. From the shadows, a slow clap echoed, deliberate and mocking. The real architect of their suffering stepped into the light, a faint smile curling on his lips. Such passion, he murmured. It's almost poetic, watching you tear each other apart when you should have been looking at me all along. Armin's breath hitched. You were supposed to be gone. Gone, the man laughed softly. I was never gone, I was patient. What followed was chaos. Accusations hurled like knives, old wounds ripped open, and truths revealed with devastating precision. Nadia's secret alliance had been manipulated from the start. Raka's supposed act of defiance had unknowingly enabled the enemy's final move. Even Armin's desperate attempt to protect everyone had set the trap that nearly destroyed them all. You used us, Raka whispered, horror replacing his fury. I revealed you, the man corrected. People only become dangerous when their secrets are exposed. The confrontation spiraled toward violence, but it was Nadia who stepped forward, placing herself between them. Her voice, though trembling, carried a quiet finality. No more, this ends tonight. She revealed the final piece, evidence, undeniable and damning, that would expose everything to the world beyond these crumbling walls. The man's smile faltered for the first time. "You wouldn't," he said, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "I toggle send," Nadia replied softly. "Watch me." The sirens began in the distance, faint at first, then swelling into an inescapable chorus. For the first time, the man looked small, cornered not by weapons, but by truth. Armin closed his eyes, a tear cutting through the grime on his face. "Why didn't you trust us?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Nadia's expression softened, the steel melting into sorrow. "Because trusting you meant risking everything," she said, "and I was too afraid to lose you." The admission broke something open in all of them: grief, anger, love, regret, emotions too tangled to separate. No victory cry followed, no triumphant embrace. Only the quiet understanding that survival had come at a cost none of them could ever repay. As authorities flooded the building and the mastermind was led away in silence, the storm outside began to ease. Dawn's first light crept through the broken windows, illuminating the wreckage of their choices and the fragile possibility of redemption. They stood together, not as heroes, not as victims, but as survivors bound by scars and truth. The future stretched before them, uncertain and unforgiving, yet real in a way their lives had never been. For the first time, no one spoke, and in that silence, the story finally ended, not with answers, but with the courage to live with the questions.